Unlikely talent comes from unlikely places. Today, most of us have forgotten his name, but John Arthur Long, born in 1884 to John William and Matilda Herzog Long in Scottdale, Pennsylvania, was long ago a name everyone across the country knew and loved. He was the youngest of 4 boys. His mother died when he was just 4 after the family moved to Washington, Pennsylvania. John W. Long and his youngest son, John Arthur, moved frequently throughout his childhood.
The Weekly Courier, 1899, Connellsville. Among the interested holiday visitors to Connellsville was John W. Long. He was reared by the late Samuel Crossland of Broad Ford, and for a number of years operated a wagon-making establishment in New Haven. Subsequently, he located to Washington, Pennsylvania, and then he removed to Ohio. He is now employed at the Water Department in Washington, D.C. He spent Christmas here with his son, Harry.
While in Washington, Arthur attended Corcoran's Scientific School, which became George Washington University, majoring in electrical engineering. He didn't graduate, but in the 1950 U.S. Census, he did state he attended for nearly 2 years. He also served as a page in the U.S. House of Representatives. However, that little fact isn't what put his name up in lights. See, little Arthur Long had much bigger plans. Arthur changed his name to John Arthur and discovered acting. In 1904, he was on stage in Pittsburgh.
The coming production of A Fair Rebel will be presented at the Duquesne Theater this week. The cast, as it is now constituted, is made up of some of the best professional people on the stage. Among the most prominent of the local performers who will appear in the cast are Lou Vizard and John Arthur.
Soon, John joined a theater stock company that traveled from coast to coast providing entertainment to towns all over the map.
Just a year before the big fire in 1906, I played in San Francisco at the Old Columbia on Powell Street, and I bless my stars I got into that company. I was in a real bind before joining the cast of Eugene Walter's Paid in Full. See, here I was in San Francisco, and I was broke. I wired my father back in New England for money. He said, "Get back home the way you got out there." I was a wandering boy and went to a local restaurant, knowing I couldn't pay for it, but thinking if I went to jail, father might relent if I was in duress. But the restaurant owner did me a favor and said I could pay whenever I could. I borrowed $10 from a legislator I knew when I was a page in Congress. I ushered at Fisher's on O'Farrell Street until I joined up with a stock company and worked my way back east.
Throughout the 1900s and the teens, John Arthur rose through the ranks of traveling stock theater, appearing in various shows, even on Broadway. In 1915, John applied for a passport to travel to London for a play. He listed his age as 39 when he was actually 34. 2 years later, when John filled out his World War I draft card, he was living at the Friars Club in New York City and listed his niece, Ruth Long of Youngwood, as his next of kin. As John's fame rose, his reviews were glowing, and reporters began asking him where he got his start.
John Arthur got his first opportunity on any stage in Pittsburgh when he was about 20 years old. At the time, there was a producer in Pittsburgh who was putting on plays for benefits, mainly benefiting his own pocketbook. This producer told the world he could make an actor out of a broomstick, and many ambitious amateurs flocked to his banner. Among them was John Arthur Long. He applied for a part in The Fair Rebel. John was cast but a small part. It was a short line. A simple line. But John studied it diligently. He said it out loud behind locked doors. He mumbled it in his soup. He muttered it as he walked the streets. He was cast as a god, and his only appearance was during the most pathetic scene of the play. His simple line was, "Madam, you cannot proceed without your pass." But John got stage fright, and here's how he delivered it. "Madam, you cannot pass without your pass." The line sounded so odd in the tearful scene that the audience spontaneously greeted it with gleeful laughter. It was the only real big laugh in the play, but the producer was not pleased. Rushing up to Arthur, shaking his finger under the trembling young player's burning nose, he declared that John would not amount to anything on stage if he lived to be 100. John isn't 100 yet, and he has amounted to something in spite of this dreadful prophecy.
I survived my horrendous first time in the spotlight, and chuckle now, knowing I did succeed, much to the chagrin of that dreadful producer. I love my craft, and the audience seems to love what I do. The reason the audience laughs at what I do is that I sit down on a chair, like an ordinary human being, and not as though I were trying to impersonate Romeo or Hamlet.
John Arthur is quite a different character off the stage. He is an ardent sportsman, being fond of all outdoor sports, but his pet hobby is the water. He owns and sells a large boat called the Penguin, having it furnished up in such a manner as to be able to live aboard the year round.
I just really want a home and a family. I love children, but sadly, I have none. No family, not even a dog. Just a motorboat that keeps me broke, just like a real family would. I just love my boat. She's an Alameda girl named the Penguin, and Penguin is also the name of the little Russian Billiken that sits guard every night in my dressing room, watching me put on my stage makeup.
Mr. Arthur has been doing farcical roles for some seasons past, and is not keen for such parts. His ambitions run to the more sober, dramatic, and character bits in which he has already succeeded admirably. He has done so for some seasons, but the party of the first parts says he's going to have something to say about the next year, and he hopes for a real dramatic chance.
There's one thing about me, if I do say it myself. I have a tag. That is, the part can lead me right into a climax, and I'll work it up to a crashing finish. There is really not a satisfaction in this farcical stuff that one gets out of a dramatic part or a character role. Farces. To be a really good farce must be serious.
In 1923, John again changed his name. He was 39 years old and had been on the stage for 20 years when he reinvented himself in Hollywood, changing his name from John to Johnny Arthur in an attempt to appear younger. His first film, now lost to history, was a sci-fi silent film called The Unknown Purple.
As the shadowy, mysterious character creeps from scene to scene, you'll grip the arms of your seat and feel the tenseness of the situation with the players. Johnny Arthur as the weak-willed rich man affords the laughter.
Those who have seen Johnny Arthur in the role of the bashful bachelor in The Whole Town's Talking may have wondered to what great power beside acting his performance is due. His role calls for the portrayal of a plotting bachelor whom life and the girls have passed up. Johnny is his counterpart in real life in the sense that the girls have passed him up too, and he knows why.
I've been dreaming about getting married ever since I've been 16. Now I'm way past 20 and I haven't been successful yet. Now I know why. You see, I listened so much to people whom I've asked about marriage and its advisability. Some said yes and some said no. I was for it, of course, but just as I was about to make a desperate proposal to a logical candidate, there was always some friend who came along talking about his domestic troubles to warn me against it. Finally, I listened to the sage counsel of a veteran actor. It was his philosophy that the modern girl always picks out the man she wants to marry and gets him. I made that philosophy mine and lay in wait, a willing victim. I waited and waited. I'm still waiting. I don't know what it is, but the girls don't talk to me. But you know the part I play now has taught me a lesson? Yes, sir. Just you wait until the right girl comes along. She won't have to ask me. Of course, the right girl of my early years is married to someone else now, but there must be other right girls. For unfortunate fellows like me, the line will form on the right.
In 1925 came an even bigger break when Johnny was cast to star alongside Lon Chaney in The Monster.
There is comedy in The Monster. You will know that at once when I tell you that Johnny Arthur is in it. Johnny Arthur, if properly handled, is going to become one of our greatest comedians. He has a wealth of quaint appeal, a true and vivid and subtle sense of drollery, and a comedy method that is all his own. This comedy manner hasn't a dash of Lloyd here and a soup can of Chaplin there. It is just all Johnny Arthur. And if Johnny ever wants to abbreviate his name by leaving off the last 3 letters, he is entitled to do so. He is Art with a capital A.
Some of the roles Johnny landed on screen were the exact same roles he played years before on stage in New York.
Johnny Arthur, who plays Peter Jones on screen in The Butter and Egg Man, first won recognition on stage with the same part in New York and over to London, where he became an instant hit. The English public claimed Arthur as their own, and it was a long time before he was able to leave.
Johnny was a versatile actor and played many roles today that would not be seen as politically correct.
A few dabs of makeup stuff, and I can make up like a Mongol in the dark. For years, I specialized in Japanese valet parts and wily Chinese diplomats. I played in about 15 dramas of the bedroom species. In a way, this is a comedy, but to theater people who know what's back of the producing game, it is pretty much of a tragedy.
Johnny's youthful appearance helped him land roles. By 1926, he was 42 years old.
What will surprise them is that Arthur is singularly juvenile looking. His countenance is small, round, and he bears a curious resemblance to the new movie star Ronald Colman. Offhand, one would say his age was around 23. Comedy is Arthur's forte.
Many times, Johnny spoke to the press about his craft. While he was much older than he appeared on screen, he really wasn't pushing for more mature roles.
To my way of thinking, there is a great deal of affection about the so-called type system. Some of it comes from critical quarters, but more often it is the actor or actress who sees the hue and cry to heaven. Personally, I have no desire to play a gentleman with rheumatism until I have had enough of it to appreciate the deeper meaning of the role. To give you an idea of what I mean, when I was in my early 20s, I was most eager to go in for the roles with beards on them. It is the desire of youth to put on as much makeup as possible, upon which basic youth concludes it is doing some real great acting. Thank heaven, I outgrew this notion as time went along, and now no beards for me until I am old enough to have one of my own.
Women don't fall in love with Johnny Arthur, they try to mother him. When he cries, folks go into gales of laughter. When he is in pain, people think he is pantomiming. The saddest thing about Johnny Arthur in his estimation is the fact that he is darned funny. He affects no trick clothes, nor does he twist his face into a careless caricature. The man with the wistful brown eyes, the comic mouth, and the struggling mustache is funny because nature so decreed it. He is appealing, human, and very laughable. With hair slicked into a small-town couture with wide, sightly, unseeing eyes, he walked through the rehearsal last week while the rest of the cast kept their faces straight with difficulty. Now his ambition is to appear in 2 or 3 stage productions and as many pictures a year, then to loaf about Southern California the remainder of the time. Yes, the climate has him. Immensely likable is Arthur. His mouth always is expecting a smile, his mood is never serious.
While he did not often return to Pennsylvania, the local Connellsville paper never forgot their connection with Johnny. In 1927, this piece appeared in the Daily Courier.
A former Connellsville boy, Arthur Long, known in the screen world as Johnny Arthur, will star at the Orpheum in Open House. Arthur resided in Connellsville and attended New Haven schools. He is a son of J.W. Long and a brother of A.B. Long of Connellsville, H.N. Long of Youngwood, and S.F. Long of Coriopolis.
In 1928, Johnny was appearing as an out gay man in The Desert Song. This was the very first time a gay character was seen on the silver screen.
Johnny Arthur plays the role of the comedian, but he yearns for the part of the hero. It all began when Arthur was cast for roles in which he was both funny and sympathetic.
It doesn't seem right that I'm not out there doing my stuff. After all, a 5'5" comedian can have a heart quite as large as a 6-foot hero, and I believe that the day is coming when I will once more have the opportunity to marry the heroine and have the curtain go down on the final clinch. You can say that I'll do regular comedy roles from now on. When some playwright does another play in which the comedian wins the heroine, then I'll be back to my old stuff. And if some playwright doesn't hurry, I'll write my own play. A comic generally writes his own gags. The playwright merely indicates the sort of humor he wants and helps out with ideas. The comedian does the rest. That is why so many persons say, after seeing a leading comedian, if you see him in one thing, you see him in everything. I have particularly tried to keep from being a one-role comic. I may have certain mannerisms in every role, things that I'm not aware that I do, but I certainly want to strive to make every role different. In the present operetta, I prove I can play low comedy as well as sympathetic comedy. Certainly I haven't had much time developing any one style of amusing audiences. It is an age of speciality, but I want variety myself.
At times, it's difficult to discern from the press articles what was true and what might have been embellished from Johnny or the studios.
Johnny Arthur, who plays in Divorce Made Easy, is a former actor of the legitimate stage, besides a screen player of note. He played in the West Coast cast of The Desert Song and enjoyed such success in the comedy role that when the famous operetta was screened, he was chosen to portray the same part. Since the advent of sound movies, he has risen to prominence as a portrayer of comedy relief roles.
By 1929, Johnny was looking to settle down. His nomadic life acting had taken him across the country several times and all the way across the Atlantic to Europe.
Last week, Johnny Arthur stopped by the record office with a carload of tile. Drama editors before this have things slung at them, though in these last years, the march of civilization has made the romantic old brick-bat bruise somewhat of a rarity. Machine gun bullet holes through the hat are far more commonly seen. I was flattered. Hand-decorated tile, and a carload of it. Stopping at my place of business just before the opening of the picture seemed a delicate attention that would warm the hardest heart. But the tile was not for me. It was for his new house by the sea. The new house in Del Mar is claiming much of the comedian's attention these days.
I'm just crazy about it. It's just a great Mexican farmhouse. Everything is beautifully simple. Not a speck of Hollywood hooey in the whole place. One of the features of the house is the fact that it is equipped entirely in electricity, with each wire installed inside an iron pipe to make for perfect safety and the most beautiful shadows. They knock me for a goal every time I see them. I've been building a real home, hoping to settle down. I've been around the world these last 20 years, and while I praise storage companies, the atmosphere in a storage building isn't that home-like.
Every time Johnny spoke to the press, there was just a little bit of humor thrown in.
Johnny Arthur's friends refused to accept the story that he was held up in a dark alley and robbed of 50 cents. But he sticks to the story. In order to avoid the crowds in front of El Capitan, the comedian slipped out through the stage door and was walking down the alley to where his car was parked. A man stepped out of the shadows, poked a gun in Johnny's ribs, and proceeded to rob him. 50 cents was the extent of his loot.
By 1930, Johnny was appearing in still more movies, including The Aviator, and was making personal appearances around Hollywood.
I just finished up a screen snapshot where I rode a mule around Hollywood, introducing up-and-coming stars. Yes, I rode a mule. The mule and I even greeted Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks at the railroad station when they returned from abroad.
In all of his movies, Johnny always seemed to have a scene where his character was anxious or terrified or nervous. The press asked him about his method.
It was back in New York several years ago. I owned a 49-foot cruiser, Penguin. During regatta week, I was always in evidence. And one day before the races, I got in the way of a huge swell from a big liner passing by. It was almost on me when I saw it rolling toward me. That was the only time I can remember being actually frightened on the water. It so happened that cruising around the bay was a newsreel cameraman getting views of the entries and the spectators in the floating grandstands. The next day, I visited a picture house in New York, which advertised the showing of the regatta films. Imagine my surprise when I suddenly saw myself on the screen, registering all the varied emotions of a frightened man trying to keep his boat from capsizing. I lived the awful moment over again, and do it every time they want a fright in a film.
Johnny was listed as living in his new home in Del Mar on the 1930 U.S. Census. His home was valued at that time at $10,000. Since coming to Hollywood, Johnny had been shaving, a couple of years off of his age. He reported to the census taker that he was 50 years old, when actually he was 56. Johnny stayed busy through 1930 and 1931, but storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. Still, Johnny remained optimistic.
The Cinderella theme is the basis of the majority of stage successes. If one stops to analyze the stage and screen hits underneath the modern treatment, will be discovered the Cinderella formula. Not highbrow, not lowbrow, but medium brow. People like to talk and feel success, whether it is in a book, in business, or in the theater. I think the slogan of a modern theater might well be, more Cinderella stories. I don't mean mamby-pamby things, but smart, breezy, modern treatments built on the old skeleton which has withstood the test of time and is still the fundamental theme of the average person's daily life. The most consistently successful player is the one who does not often deviate from the certain thing that made him successful. Versatility for a star is, of course, very necessary, but it is the essence of foolishness to try to give the public what it does not want. In my own case, I have always stuck to the comedy roles of a timid, shrinking character. I was always the henpecked, misunderstood husband.
Even with his ever-present humor, Johnny was serious about his craft.
Acting is a business, and an actor has no more right to blow up and give a bad performance when he is feeling out of sorts than a transport airplane pilot has blowing up and crashing on a landing. More temper than mental is the comment of the actor. I have no sympathy with the actor who does not give the best performance of which he is capable every time he steps upon the stage. Some actors claim that a performance must vary from night to night. They assert that when you are not feeling up to par, or something distracts your attention, your performance will suffer. I do not believe in this theory. To me, it is a lazy alibi. I think that any actor worthy of the name can give the same spontaneity to his performance each night. Whenever he is playing in New York or some town not even mentioned on the map, he's cheating if he lets down, does not give the people in the audience their money's worth.
Johnny Arthur seems to be dividing his time equally between El Capitan Theater and Motion Picture Studios. When the completed record-breaking engagement with Charlotte Greenwood in parlor, bedroom, and bath, he went immediately to Metro-Goldwyn Mayer. Henry Duffy got in touch with him and signed him for the Butter and Egg Man, George S. Kaufman's comedy hit at El Capitan. And now it is rumored that following the run of this comedy, he is scheduled to report at PATH for a comedy special on the production program of that studio.
In 1932, his successful career came to a halt with one newspaper article. We will never know why Johnny was outed to the public, but his career dramatically plunged downward after this article appeared.
Johnny Arthur, the comedian, is very fond of this beach and was here the other day. Johnny has a sailor friend who came to see him. The sailor went down by the pier for a swim, wearing a costume so abbreviated that the guardian of beach morals had to look at him only a dozen times to realize that it wasn't even franker than the trucks only swimming guard 57 other men on the beach were wearing. The beach guardian got out his measuring tape and measured. The result was a triumph for the keen powers of observation. By actual measurements, the swimmer's supporters were half an inch shorter than the proper, or 2-inch trunks. So the sailor was ordered to vacate the beach. The next day, Johnny brought his guest down to the beach again. Somewhere he had dug up a woman's bathing suit of the gay 90s. But we don't see how anyone ever got gay in a suit like that. It had sleeves down to the wrist, and a knee-length skirt over bloomers. But never before have we been so amused at the beach as we were this year.
During the same period of the early 1930s, the Hays Code was enacted, and it banned any mention or depiction of sex, homosexuality, or pregnancy on the screen. Sailor man or sailor boy was a well-known slur in the 1930s. Arthur's heyday was during the pre-production code days, where he starred in 26 films. Johnny did manage to continue to act, but his parts were limited to character roles or bit parts on the screen. In the mid-1930s, Hal Roach cast Johnny in the Our Gang comedies as Spanky's father, and then later he played Darla's father. He also appeared in The Ex-Mrs. Bradford, which was a sequel to The Thin Man. In 1937, he appeared in It Happened Out West and Frank Capra's You Can't Take It With You in 1938. By 1940, he was appearing with Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, and Dorothy Lamour in The Road to Singapore. By 1942, Johnny was 58 years old and living at the Gilbert Hotel when he landed a role in a campy war propaganda movie called The Nazi Nuisance. This Hal Roach film roasted Hitler, Mussolini, and Hirohito. Johnny plays a stereotypical Japanese character by the name of Sukiyaki. Johnny donned thick glasses and makeup to transform into the Japanese emperor. Later that year, Johnny's brother came to visit.
Mr. and Mrs. A.B. Long of Race Street in Connellsville returned home Sunday from a 3-week trip to California. They went to Hollywood to see Mr. Long's brother, movie actor Johnny Arthur, who at the time was in the desert making a picture. Their son, Corporal Long, visited his uncle, and it was the first time he had seen him. The Longs say California is beautiful, but give me good old Pennsylvania.
Sadly, Johnny's health began to decline in 1946.
Still in a serious condition today at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital was Johnny Arthur. Between 60 and 70 years old, veteran of 45 years of stage and film, comic, and character roles, who was found in a coma yesterday in his room at Gilbert Hotel.
His very last film credit was in the 1947 classic It Happened on Fifth Avenue, directed by Roy Del Ruth. His last appearance on stage came in 1948 when he returned to New York City one last time to play in Time for Elizabeth, where he took his last bow.
Johnny K. Arthur, 68, an outstanding comic of silent films, is dead today. Mr. Arthur spent thousands of dollars to buy meals for the hungry and to help other actors who were in straits, a friend related, and ended up with no money. He resided the last 30 years in the Gilbert Hotel. The comic died Monday in the Motion Picture Hospital in Woodland Hills. His kin, if any, is not known as the actor spoke little of family, even to close friends.
As the years passed, Johnny was forgotten in Hollywood until 2012. Scott Michaels, with the dearly departed Tours in Hollywood, started a fundraising campaign to buy Johnny a headstone. In 2012, his headstone was placed on his unmarked grave at Valhalla Memorial Park. Michaels believed Johnny deserved the honor and said,
I think of Johnny Arthur as the gay Stephen Fetch. Some consider his un-PC roles offensive, but he was providing the public one of the first glimpses of a gay man, and he deserves our respect. He took a bullet for us.
Today, movie buffs are rediscovering Johnny Arthur's films. Mike Trappetti, author of Once Upon an Ending, featured Johnny over 60 years after his death in his blog Not Very Famous, but Should Be.
Not many actors were able to upstage Lon Chaney. However, in 1925, in a movie called The Monster, an actor did just that. His name was Johnny Arthur. Falling somewhere between the antics of Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd, I have a hard time understanding why this talent was not mentioned in the same breath as Chaplin, Keaton, Arbuckle, or Lloyd. Recently, film scholars have looked at this early work of Johnny Arthur and have credited him as the man that created the first gay character in movies because of his over-the-top effeminate portrayals in the films Penrod and Sam and The Desert Song. Putting all that aside, though, all one has to do is watch the aforementioned film The Monster to see for yourself why Johnny Arthur is my pick of the day for Not Very Famous, but Should Be.
Today, 138 years after his birth, Johnny Arthur is being celebrated in his birthplace of Scottdale, Pennsylvania. One has to wonder what he would have thought of all the changes. But somehow, we think he would have found the humor and continued to entertain us.